This video shows how and why I built this hydraulic press out of scrap materials that I had laying around so that I could fix my car's wheel bearing so that later that afternoon I could drive 7 hours to Washington, D.C. so that I could see Adam Savage and his team put this little part that I made, as well as parts that many other makers have made, to make this recreation hatch to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing. So the first thing I had to do was take my car apart to get the old wheel bearing off. And once I got the old wheel bearing off, then I went to my barn and I found some scrap material and I mocked it up with some 2x4s that I cut. I cut some steel in my bandsaw, and once I got the frame mocked up, I got my grinder out and I grinded down the areas to remove the paint and rust and all that from the areas where I was going to weld. And then I tack welded some pieces of the frame together, and I cut some more pieces of steel down to size for the crossbars. I drilled holes in the crossbars so that they could attach to the adjustable slots that were already in the frame rails that I found. I bolted the crossbars onto the frame. I welded in the plate that the jack would be attached to. So I welded some springs on the sides to help pull the jack assembly back up when you're done pressing something, when you release the pressure. And then I took some extra scrap and I tested the press out by just kind of smashing and bending some things and kind of playing with it a little bit just to see if anything was going to bend or break before I actually got my wheel bearing on there. And I did find that one part of my crossbar assembly did bend a little bit, so I reinforced that a little. I used my chainsaw to cut down my 2x4s that I had left overly large. Those weren't intended to be part of the final design, so I just took my chainsaw, chopped them down real quick, set it up on my bench, and got it ready to work. I had to cut the upright parts of my frame down a little bit. They were too tall to get the whole machine onto my workbench, and I welded a crossbar across the top to keep those frame rails, the upright pieces, from bowing in or out when there's any pressure applied and things like that. Here's a picture of it once it's done, and here is me taking my wheel bearing assembly, and I had to press out the old bearing, and then I had to press in the new bearing into the wheel bearing hub assembly piece there. Now at this point I know it's not super pretty, but I was in a rush. I had to get this thing done so that I could get my car back on the street so that I could make it to DC for this event. So this is kind of what it looked like when I was using it. Once I got home from DC, I polished it up a little bit better. I got rid of the 2x4s. I chopped the frame down a little more nicely, ground off the sharp edges, and then I gave it a coat of paint. And here's what the finished product looks like after it's all finished up. Now I know that this press could have probably been designed in a much stronger way. I could have gone out and bought materials and things like that. But in the scenario that I was in, my budget was $0. I needed to do this project with stuff I had laying around. So I had to do what I could with what I had. Otherwise, I wasn't going to make it to DC. So this was it was a fun project on my end because I had a chance to make what I could with what I had, and I ended up with a tool that I'm actually going to get some use out of, and I think it came out pretty good, and I like it. I don't think if I rebuilt it, I don't think I would really change much. I like exactly how it came out, and it's got its own little character. The total time from start of the project, when I started making some sketches on paper, all the way through the build process, disassembling and reassembling the car, was just a little under 4 hours. And I did make it to DC for the build and back safely without any wheels falling off or anything like that. And here's a few pictures of Adam Savage and his team at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum assembling the Project Egress Apollo recreation hatch.